We should be live.
Hello, let us know if we are live. Tell us something in the chat. If we are, let us know how the audio is. I am Brandon, your author for the afternoon, or the evening, since this is a Europe-friendly stream. And somebody wandered in off the street.
Weird.
Yes, some random dude was wandering by, and he came in and he's like, hello, can I have some live stream, please? And sat down. Everyone, welcome. This is Brian McClellan.
Hey!
Brian McClellan, who lives you live like just up the street, basically.
Literally right up the street.
And I almost never see you. So,
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by, Brian.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to stop by.
How's life treating you?
I mean, I can't complain too much. Like, there's always something that you can complain about.
Yes, I suppose.
Obviously.
Yes.
But no, I write books, I sell books, and I do that, and I do it again. So it's great.
I was thinking about you the other day because we were having an argument, more of a just intellectually stimulating discussion at writing group about what is grimdark, because they were talking about Black Library, and it turns out, according to, I haven't read Black Library, that's the Warhammer 40K series of books.
Okay, I haven't either.
They're supposed to be really good.
Yeah.
And one of my friends was like, no, those aren't grimdark. I'm like, what? If Warhammer 40K novels aren't grimdark, what is grimdark? He's like, well, not those. And I kind of believe him because my sister-in-law, who likes things very PG, Black Library is one of her favorite things, right? And so I'm like, well, and then they said, I said, is McClellan grimdark? Is Powder Mage grimdark? And we couldn't decide. Oh. So I want to ask you, is Powder Mage grimdark?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
When I was writing it, as a little baby pre-author, I was very specifically aiming for something between you and Joe Abercrombie. Because Joe Abercrombie, I definitely consider grimdark.
Well, I mean, he adopted the handle Lord Grimdark on Twitter, right? Like, he's if anyone is grimdark, it's got to be him.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, because I'm still a little bit of a romantic in terms of, like things are, in the end, probably going to work out okay.
Yeah, except for all
my
those
characters.
people that died.
Except for all the people that died. Like,
yes.
there's some brutality in the books, certainly. And, I mean, they're basically military fantasy.
Yeah.
But it's still, you're going to have a vaguely happy ending, which, Joe's books don't. I mean, it depends on your perspective of happy ending, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, Powder Mage, not grimdark.
I don't think so.
One step toward grimdark from a Sanderson thing, but not to the line, the demarcation line of grimdarkness.
Yeah. It's going to be like halfway in between.
Okay.
But I wouldn't. Yeah, I've never considered myself grimdark at all.
For those who don't know, grimdark is a subgenre of fantasy, usually, though it can be science fiction, as evidenced by where it came from. That is, it was a term that started getting talked about when people were discussing George Martin and Joe Abercrombie and kind of that era of grittier fantasy that was coming out. And the phrase actually comes from a tagline for Warhammer 40K where it says, in the grim dark future, or the grim dark something of the future, or something like that, there is only war. You can look it up where it came from, but it's like people started taking it as a pejorative term, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, everything is so dark and grim. But then it turned into like a valid subgenre, except like anything in sci-fi fantasy, defining it is going to depend on the people discussing its mood at the moment.
Right.
What is fantasy? Woo! We don't even know what that is, so yeah.
Yeah, I feel like maybe grimdark, like, you're going to have characters who tend to be very
characters?
Grim. I think of grim characters. Like, and so, yeah, it's, I don't know, like, because I consider, like, my books to be dark, but not necessarily grim.
I would consider a hallmark of grimdark the idea that grimdark is exploring the shades of gray in interesting ways. That's one of the things that I would say is, like, if it's anything, it's a response against the heroic and epic movements of fantasy. The heroic fantasy being kind of the manly men killing wizards.
Yeah.
Strain of fantasy, and epic being the people with an epic destiny go on a quest in order to save the world from a darkness that is unveiling, or things like that, right? And a lot of people say what George did is he took some of the brutality of the heroic tradition, but stripped away the heroes, and then kind of the scale of the epic tradition, but again without the heroes. And so it's a world where you've taken away that veneer of shall I say heroism, so you can really just look at the shades of gray. And yeah, I don't write grimdark, but I can appreciate what it does for the genre.
Yeah.
And it obviously didn't start there, right? Because I think you'd have trouble arguing that Elric isn't grimdark if you've ever read Elric back in the 70s.
I haven't, no.
Yeah. Which is about a guy who's got a magic sword that sustains his life, but he lives in a culture where no one has consciences. It's just a race of people with no consciences.
Yeah.
He's cursed to have one, so he feels bad for the things he does, but he still ends up doing all these terrible things because his sword needs to drink souls, particularly souls of people he likes, in order to keep him alive. And it is in the heroic tradition. He goes and saves the world a bunch of times, but kind of very grimly.
See, I'm always very compelled by the idea of characters who are not necessarily heroes. They want to do good things, but they have to make terrible decisions occasionally.
Right.
And I like that. I
that
always
feels pretty grimdark to me, personally.
Really? 'Cause I
but maybe I define it differently. Everyone says, "Oh, grimdark is this no one wants to be grimdark except Joe, because Joe embraces whenever anyone points at Joe and says something mocking, he's like, "Oh yeah, well I'm going to be that thing." But I think that no one wants to be grimdark because it's used so pejoratively. It's used dismissively. But I think, exploring those ideas, I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, interesting. Because I think of grimdark as maybe as just like nobody's going to be happy at the end of this, and that's kind of that doesn't really pluck at me as an author. I like it as a reader. I love Joe's books.
Right.
But as an author, that kind of it's a little too dour for me.
Yeah, no, that just might be too reductive because it includes a lot of Joe's work, but it doesn't include George then, because there are happy people at the end of George's, theoretically, in a lot of his books. But Game of Thrones, if you take the TV show, there's at least some people who are kind of happy. Right. Right. A lot of people are miserable, but several people are at least happy or satisfied. I don't know. A definition of grimdark that says everybody has to be sad just cuts out almost everything. Right. From the genre.
I guess I mean, like you were saying, I think it depends on who you're asking, and maybe even what mood the person you're asking is in. Because if I'm in a bad mood, then maybe I'll totally say, grimdark, this is bad. But who knows?
One thing that might be kind of a hallmark of it, I don't know, is that good deeds get punished.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, I could totally see that.
Being good in a kind of classic fantasy way is not something you want to be in these worlds, because at the end of the day, that's just going to expose you to being brought down by the people who are willing to not be good. The sort of Eddard Stark philosophy. I don't know. I should say what you are. You are, if you guys don't know Brian is a fantastic author of, he broke out with the Flintlock fantasy series with Orbit, Orbit US, and has written, you've written probably a dozen novels at this point?
No, I'm at 7, including the ones coming out next year.
Okay.
And then I've got a bunch of novellas and short fiction and stuff like that.
Okay. So there we are. McClellan. The ones coming out next year, have they all been announced and everything?
Yeah.
I have one of those on my desk. I've been reading it, so I didn't know if we could talk about that or not, or what.
We're totally allowed to talk about it.
Okay.
It's I think in fact I was just talking to our mutual editor 2 days ago about the cover art for it. So.
Nice. So Brian has a new epic fantasy this time series coming out from Tor. When next year?
June, as far as I
June,
know.
which means I need to actually get that quote in, probably.
She did say, hey, you talked to Brandon,
ask him
right?
about that quote. Yeah. I've been reading it. It's really good.
Oh, good.
Good job.
I'm glad. Yeah, that's you and I discussed the
Yes.
magic system for that like 3 years ago.
Yes,
at dinner.
Ruby River.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where we were. Yep. Yep. You were contemplating. I was gonna say coming to the dark side of epic fantasy, but it's less dark generally than where you already were. So the less dark side.
I mean, it's still
gritty.
It's still flintlock fantasy, and it's still gritty, but I like because Powder Mage very focused on like
it was
the Flintlock
military
area.
fantasy.
Yeah.
And this is epic. At least that's how I read it. So
yeah, I like because in Powder Mage most of the characters are soldiers.
Yeah.
And this you have one soldier and then a variety of other characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited about that. I finally, that was this is my first epic fantasy that's like not Powder Mage as a like professional author.
Right.
And so like making that transition after spending 6 fat books in a single world, it's been really fun, but like really daunting, like intimidating. Because I've done a bunch of short fiction within the Powder Mage world, and I did a little self-published urban fantasy series. But I haven't really written long form of a
really
new
long form,
epic
right?
fantasy.
How many words is this?
I think it's 215.
Yeah.
So it's my longest book
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. Ooh, we've got Owen Wilson in the background. Wow. No, you're totally. I would like you to Owen Wilson. I'm just kind of, having watched Loki. Now I hear the wows more often. Wow. Yeah.
Man, Loki was so good.
I really enjoyed it.
I did too.
We won't talk spoilers. It has enormous flaws, and yet I just loved it the whole time. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe we should take some questions from the audience. We're trying to do this at a time. Once in a while we do these so that Europe can stop by and it's not 4 a.m. or something. So that's why we're doing this in the afternoon. This will be a 90-minute stream because I have a meeting about movie stuff, right?
Always busy.
Always busy. So yeah. The eternal meetings about movie stuff that nothing ever comes from is my life. Regards to Hollywood. Did they snatch up and buy your stuff?
Yeah, I've got a showrunner, and I've got for a little TV show, and it's with a tiny Canadian company. And you know what? I'm just kind of sitting back and letting them go.
Have you read a pilot yet?
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it.
Okay, then don't. They can be really weirdly secretive about things. They can get very sort of I don't know, prickly about the author talking about anything. I generally ignore that, but it's not good advice to do so.
My showrunner is Joe Malozzi, who did a bunch of Stargate. And he has been awesome. And in fact, he was the first guest on my new podcast. And he talked about it way more than I expected him to. And so I've seen an opening scene, and I think I'm supposed to get a pilot in the next couple of months.
Sweet.
But yeah, it's such a slow process.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's funny because you've got like big Hollywood machine thing going on. And I've got like little tiny Canadian production company, and neither moves faster.
Well, I bet yours ends up moving faster. This is why every time I have Dan Wells on the stream, he points out he has a movie and I don't.
Yeah.
Because he went with an indie company that could just make the movie. So I don't know. What kind of questions are we getting in the chat, producer Adam?
One question I heard that I think would be nice to get Brian's take on it, since we've heard your take so many times. This person was looking for advice on editing their book the first time.
Ooh.
So any advice for them?
Man, so first time editing a book, I would say let it sit for like 3 months. That's like my first step usually, is to say, I'm gonna sit on this. I'm gonna go do something else, whether it's a creative process or whether I'm playing video games for 3 months. Which I'm a career author. I'm allowed to do that, which is great.
What video game have you been playing lately then?
Oh man, I did Valheim for a while.
Okay.
7 Days to Die is I did that for like the last month with a bunch of friends, and then I've been getting back into Rimworld because it's got a new expansion.
I keep meaning to play Rimworld.
It's so good,
yeah.
but only for like a particular type of gamer.
Right. It's it's a roguelike sort of base building game? Is that what it is?
It's a top-down base building game that it's science fiction setting of.
It's like a less punishing Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah.
I've never dared try Dwarf Fortress because, it just sounds so punishing. And I like roguelikes. I like games that are hard, but I don't like games that don't end. And I hear Dwarf Fortress is like, see how long you can last and then you die. I like those roguelikes that you do have a goal that you can accomplish.
Yeah. Rimworld is more like build a base until you get bored and go play a different game.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I play it.
Is there like any ending at all?
You can choose an ending. I have hundreds of hours in Rimworld and I've never played an ending.
Okay.
I just play the game until I want to do something different.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
That's kind of my tactic with most games.
That's part of why I haven't picked it up is because, like, I need some sort of finite ending that says you are done with this thing.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, then it'll feel unsatisfying for me, or like I'll play past when I'm enjoying it. Has been my experience. I don't play MMOs for that reason. Right? Not interested in a game that doesn't have an ending.
I just realized now that you said that I never finish games. I've not finished Zelda. I've not finished. Skyrim. I have like 300 hours into, and I've never played the ending.
Okay.
I just don't play the endings of games.
Okay.
I play until it's no longer enjoyable, and then one day I will wake up and do something different.
Okay.
And it's kind of I don't know, maybe that's weird.
I don't think that's that weird. I bet a bunch of people in chat are like, yeah, I've never finished Skyrim either. Because Skyrim's this odd thing. I have finished most of the Bethesda games that I've played, but they have this thing where often the side story is more interesting than the main story.
Yeah.
I think Skyrim's an exception. I think the main story in Skyrim is really interesting. But a lot of times it's like, for instance, I played Fallout 4, and the expansion stories were so much better than the main story. I almost didn't finish the main story because it was less good than some of the side stories, particularly several of the expansions. So
yeah, I don't think I ever played the expansions, but I played the base game, and then at some point I was like, yeah, I'm sick of trying to save settlements, and then I just stopped playing.
Yeah, I stopped saving settlements pretty early on
Yeah.
because that gameplay was so tedious, and that might be why I went and tried the side things and found them good. Man, that game was so disappointing in some ways because I really like the Fallout universe.
Yeah.
I really like New Vegas. It's one of my top games of all time, and I didn't expect New Vegas. This is more mass market appeal. I understand that, but I heard, base building. I've always wanted to do more base building in Fallout. That feels like restoring, the wasteland to.
1 second, Brandon. The stream just went down.
Oh.
It's probably with the stuff that Jared did to the internet.
Okay.
He was doing a lot of stuff here, so we should be live back up.
Okay, we might be live back up. Let us know. We've been having troubles with our internet here at Cosmere House. So I was saying, really excited about Fallout 4 for base building. I've always wanted to base build in a Fallout world. It's like restoring some semblance of civilization to the wasteland is really appealing to me. And then I got to play it. It was so tedious and so bad. And like whoever decided that your base building was going to be, instead of you build one really cool base, you build 30 lame bases, ought to have a long discussion about what makes gameplay compelling and interesting. I just thought that mechanic was terrible.
Yeah, I did. It was the same problem I had because the base building is like my jam when it comes to gaming, and like I remember building a massive base at that starting area where you've got the cul-de-sac and everything, and I felt so pleased with it, and I was and then it's like, oh, go build a base somewhere else, and I'm like, oh, okay, and then a third time and a fourth time, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
They took my favorite thing and made it not fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I that decision just baffles me.
Yeah.
And the base building, they had like lots of good ways to make it work, which was cool. Like you could actually build structures and things like that, which I didn't expect in a Fallout game. Sure would have been nice if they let you build something that didn't look like the tool shed that's outside of your grandpa's house that hasn't been touched in 40 years. I mean, I know it's Fallout, but you can sand things, right? You have that ability. You can take the rust off of things. You have a hammer. You can pick up a hammer. You can beat the dents out of things. You can build an actual house. That's one of the amusing things about Fallout is everything. It's been, in this world, it's been like 100 years since the bombs dropped. Yeah. And everything still looks like something my children would build out of the leftover lumber from a construction project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 7 Days to Die does a pretty good job with their building like mechanic, and they've got lots of options. And then at the very end, you can once you've built stuff, you can paint it with any surface from the game.
That's cool,
which is quite cool. And it's weird because it's one of those games that I would not have played on my own, but I had friends that were interested, and so because it's a zombie apocalypse game.
Okay.
And I'm not big into zombie games, but I love apocalypse games, and so it was kind of my friends want to do this, and then as soon as I got into it, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna build the base. You guys go kill zombies.
See, I haven't been able to really convince myself to get into Valheim or any of these sorts of things. Ark is the same way.
Yeah.
Because this feels like a subgenre that is that shares a lot of elements across games, too much for me. And I played Subnautica, and I really like Subnautica. And then I started playing Ark, and I'm like, it's just the same thing again, it feels like to me. Yeah. It's like, all right, go hit some weeds, make some straw shoes, and things like that. And I'm like, number one, Subnautica had a story, which was really helpful to me.
Yeah.
It hooked me and was gripping from the start. And a lot of them, it's like they're building sandbox. They all learned from Minecraft. Build a cool sandbox, people will enjoy it. I appreciate that. But where's the story? Where's the game for me? I don't know. I haven't been able to get into that. My kids are wanting me to play Grounded with them, which is the same sort of game, except you are the size of ants.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get me into that, so maybe I'll enjoy that one.
Grounded's got a lot of bugs, which is a funny joke.
Yes.
You actually literally fight bugs.
It's still early access, I believe.
Yeah, it is. It's got a lot of bugs, but I played it a little bit with some friends, and it's fun. It's got a great setting. It does have a story, but it's pretty short right now.
That's the other thing. All these games are early access, which I understand, but I don't want to play early access. I don't have a lot of gaming time. We're talking about all these games. I have not been able to play, just sit down and play a game because of things that have been demanding my time since Hades, which was over the Christmas break, right? And we're now into August. And so there's been no gaming time for Brandon other than sitting down with his sons and playing.
Yeah.
And 8 months. And so if I get a couple weeks to play a game, I do not want to sit down and play the unfinished one. I want to get the finished one, but everything's in early access.
And I don't know, maybe that's just the state of kind of indie gaming now.
Yeah.
And with Valheim, it's a bit of I wouldn't call it a scandal, but it was they have a tiny 4 or 5 person production team, and then suddenly their game made $100 million.
Yeah.
And so everybody expected all this stuff from them, and they're like, guys, we're a little Swedish production team. We're gonna do our best. And so it's very slow coming out with new content. And
that's actually kind of smart of them, though, because what I know of the industry, the ballooning and hiring 100 people all of a sudden would just cause them to collapse.
Yeah.
So I do have the new Subnautica pseudo standalone game.
That's the one with the ice world, right?
Yeah. In my back pocket to play here soon. My son has already finished it twice. But yeah.
I've started Subnautica 4 times, but I have a fear of dark water. And so I always get I'll spend a bunch of time in the reef at the beginning, and then as soon as it gets deeper, I'm like, I can't play it anymore. I'm done.
That's legit. I can totally see that. I just thought the game was so beautiful.
It's gorgeous. And that's the only reason I've tried it several times, is because it's so good looking.
And I thought that the way they did the story was really good with the breadcrumbs. It never tells you what to do,
Yeah.
but it breadcrumbs you really well. It's a linear story that feels like it's not, and that's pretty cool.
Well, and it doesn't have the desperation, so that if you are in it just to build a big underwater base, you can do that.
Yes. What other questions we got, Producer Adam?
So I don't have the comment in front of me now, but the person mentioned, Brian, how proud you were of your query letter for Promise of Blood. They are looking for tips on query letters. I can't talk today.
Oh man, so this was a long time ago. This would have been 2011 or so, I think. But from what I remember, I actually looked it up recently because I got another question about it. But from what I remember, it was very straightforward, because I think a lot of people want to put everything in their kitchen sink inside of a query letter. And my query letter was, I think it was like 3 paragraphs. It was, this is who I am and what my qualifications are. This is the elevator pitch. And then I think the 3rd paragraph was a little bit of something to make it personal for the person I was querying. So I'd say, like, that one was always personalized. So it would be like, oh, and I know such and such an author, and they highly recommend you,
Right.
and that you represent them, and they love you,
I think
or something
the
like that.
stream went down again.
So we're
We're live. It just started a new stream, unfortunately.
So we'll see if people decide to join us at the new stream.
I will probably
Go propagate that.
Well,
see if
people are
it's-
moving over. We're at the 650 of the
Okay.
1200 that were here, so people are moving slowly over.
So, yes. All right. Well, thank you, 650 of you who have moved to the new stream. So, Brian, the
Yes.
beard looks nice.
Thank you.
I always feel out of place talking to other fantasy authors because all the good ones have beards.
I still want you to grow a big beard.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like maybe someday I will when I'm like in my 70s, and then I'll just do a big old Gandalf beard,
Yeah.
right? The problem is, like, Pat really has that giant mountain man beard thing
Yeah.
cornered. That's Mr. Rothfuss, and so I don't know.
See, I've never thought of it for myself as a fantasy author thing. It's just I'm super uncomfortable with my chin,
Right.
and so I'm always going to have a beard.
Well, I don't think it's a fantasy author thing so much as a lot of fantasy authors did it, so it feels,
Yeah.
it's like more an authorly thing.
Yeah.
Have you given any, like, much thought to, like, what your visual brand is as an author?
Man. No. I mean, like, I just show up and do things. I don't really, I never dress up. I never dress down. I just show up in a t-shirt and shorts.
Okay.
And that's kind of me. And I feel like it's my right as as somebody who works for themselves.
Right, to decide.
Right.
Yeah.
I met with my film agent like 5 years ago.
Who's your film agent?
I think we have the same guy, Steve.
So, okay, yeah.
And I remember going to his office in LA and sitting there, like, looking around, and all of these people are, like, dressed really nice, and
Right.
the other guests in the lounge are, like, like business people. And I'm like, traveling, and I'm sitting there in a dumpy t-shirt feeling like, oh,
They're
whoops.
used to it. When I've met with actors,
Yeah.
half the time actors are these, like, immaculately dressed people in very chic clothing, and half the time they are people in a t-shirt with, like, a cat on their lap. So, yeah. I think the Hollywood agents are used to the talent being a little. You have the power to dress down,
Yeah.
whereas the agents are like, we better look quote unquote professional. So,
Right.
in fact, if you dressed up, you'd look weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Adam, what's going on in chat? Anyone have any interesting things to throw our direction?
Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to troubleshoot everything
Oh,
over
okay.
here. So let me get a
We
quick
could
question
just-
for
We
you.
can just blab.
Are you okay doing that for a
Yeah,
few minutes?
you
Sorry,
troubleshoot
chat.
away. We will just blab and blab and blab. So, COVID. Do you
Ugh.
like? did you cancel all your appearances and stuff?
Yeah.
Was that more frustrating or more liberating to you?
There's an element of liberation to being able to say, oh, I'm not going to do this.
Right.
But I really, like, I'm an introvert who likes to be extroverted like 5 weekends a year. And so having to cancel all my trips, which are like my social time, that sucked. And
Right.
like I just backed out of FanX this fall at Salt Lake.
Oh, did ya?
Because I'm just not super comfortable with 100,000 people in a room. And, the Delta variant right now. And so I'm just, and it makes me feel a little sick because because it was the one con I was going to do this year.
Right.
And then, and it's local for me. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I don't know. I kind of went back and forth. I would go in waves. I would go in waves of, I have been alone in my office for 8 months doing nothing. Everything sucks. And then alternately, I'd be, oh yeah, this is great. I don't have to have a day job. I don't have to go in anywhere and wear a mask and do all this stuff. So it was.
Knowing you though, it would probably what you just described there was probably not good for your writing time.
It was not.
Yeah.
No. This.
You're not alone. A lot of writers just just killed their ability to write for a year almost.
Yeah. I would go I'd go hot and cold really badly because whenever I'm getting into a new series, my first book is always a bunch of rewrites and trying to get the world fitting itself. And then my second and third books tend to be very straightforward, single draft. But so this first book, totally new universe, first book in a new world, I spent a lot of time writing stuff that I didn't need to write. And it got worse during COVID. And it really frustrated the heck out of me. And I would spend months where I'd have a deadline looming and I'd just do no writing. I'd feel kind of like I can't get this to write. And then suddenly something would click and I'd write, 70,000 words in 3 weeks or whatever. And it was a very hot and cold sort of back and forth.
Okay.
And I honestly, when COVID started,
The stream just went down again. Hopefully we're back live again.
Okay.
It
So
looks
this
like
time
it made us start a new stream.
we had to
So-
start a new stream again. But I'll tell people as they migrate over. This time we theoretically have it fixed. We got a hold of our IT guy, and our IT guy told us some things to do to make it more stable. So you can go propagate, give it 5 minutes to make sure it doesn't drop again. And then if that's the case, you can go propagate and say, we maybe fixed it.
Yes.
So now we're speaking to the select few who have found the new stream.
Yeah, only
Right.
250.
Only 250.
Oh,
These
man.
250 are the most observant 250 live stream watchers that
And
we have.
since it made me start a new stream, the title of the video is wrong. It's saying full spoiler cosplayer things. I'm gonna go fix that right now.
Okay, go fix it.
This is not a spoiler stream.
This is
just
not a
so
spoiler
everyone
stream.
knows.
This is all. We're just gonna blame Kellen, right?
Yeah.
So we're just gonna blame Kellen on our staff.
And she is moderating today. So
She's moderating. Kellen, from wherever in the aether you are, stop destroying our internet with your brain waves, sending out pulses. Stop magnetoing our internet. Magneto could play real havoc with people's internet.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be rough. Mm-hmm. Now that's taking down my internet stream. That's real supervillain stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, killing New York, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
But internet stream, phew.
McClellan made all the work to walk down the street. Well, you have to drive. You are that far.
I do.
But,
It's like
to
2
drive
miles.
2 minutes to my office and come downstairs. He had to put on pants.
The worst.
Mm-hmm.
I showered
Had to
before
comb
6 p.m.
The beard.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had to look all good for this.
Yeah, and now Kellen is using her magneto powers on our stream.
She's probably rolling her eyes so hard right now.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad.
So we were talking about stuff, and then we got interrupted rudely by Kellen. Oh yeah, we were talking about you not going to FanX and
Yeah.
interrupting
Oh,
your.
COVID. Yeah.
and
COVID.
COVID,
Right.
and now you're still kind of feeling a funk because things are still uncertain.
Yeah, it's a bit. You know, I've got a ton of projects to work on.
Yeah.
Because I got book 2 of this series. I've got like a bunch of self-published things that I've been promising readers for like a year and a half now. But then the last book that's under contract kept taking longer and longer and longer. And, you know, now that I'm back with Davey, she doesn't like it when I just take a break and go work
Davey
on my own
doesn't put
things.
up with stuff. No, that's yeah. For those who don't know Davey is she's like got some fancy new title over at Tor. She's
She like
editorial
runs
director
Tor now,
or something.
yeah.
She's the new Tom, and she is really good at her job, but she does not put up with anything.
Yeah.
From anyone. So
True.
yeah, she has to put up with more from me. But I'm on the other side. It's not taking a break. It's me saying, we're going to do this thing at this time when you're not quite ready to do it.
Right.
And stuff like that. And to her credit, she just kind of moves boulders around so that so the Sanderson machine can drive on through. So we appreciate Davey for that.
Oh, she's very good at that.
Yeah.
She's funny because she has bought all 9 of my contracted novels now, which is because she only edited 4 at Orbit, and then she got poached by Tor.
Right.
And then I ended up just kind of orphaned at Orbit, and they were lovely. But then
They're a good company.
did great. And but then Davey kind of gave me the nudge nudge wink wink kind of treatment as I was prepping to go out with the new novel on submission.
Yep.
And I'm at Tor now.
The Tor, you never are gonna be able to go see the Flatiron Building though. They left the Flatiron Building. For those who are Sam Raimi fans, is that was the Daily Bugle in the Spider-Man movies. The weird wedge-shaped building on Manhattan.
It's like one of the most iconic buildings in New York.
That's where Tor was.
Yeah.
But it is not up to certain codes, and they were going to have to kick Tor out for 2 years to do renovations. And so that McClellan just grabbed Tor, which is an arm of McClellan, and said, you're coming over here to be with everyone else. You sci-fi guys can't be off in your own cool building anymore.
Yeah.
You have to come be with the rest of the kids. And so they all had to leave the Daily Bugle and go be with all the normal people.
Like professionals.
Yeah. Yeah, they're gonna all have to start wearing pants now too. It worked.
That's rough.
Such a good move, though. That building was so crowded.
It was so crowded and so like the Tor offices. You probably never went there. Like it did not feel like offices. It felt like poorly ventilated warehouse space or something. Adam had to work there for a summer when I sent him to do an internship with Tor Publicity. And like you move through these little tunnel-like corridors that are filled and stacked with things because there's nowhere else to put them, and squeeze into an office where somebody is like huddled in a corner, and there's like, the roof is like next to their head sloped or whatever, just because the building is such an odd, old New York building. I mean, it's really cool, but it was not a good professional workspace.
See, I went to the Hachette headquarters a couple years ago when I was in London.
Yeah,
and that was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like a big open windows, lots of space, big meeting rooms.
Yeah. Did they do the thing where they move all your books out to the front?
Yeah.
So when you walk in, you're like, oh, my books are on. Oh, you knew I was coming. You put my books on display. They're not here normally.
Yeah.
Normally, it's like you've got the books by Stephen King on display there.
Right.
But for one day, they
Make you feel special.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wonder if they have an intern whose job it is just to have a list of all the authors that are visiting and make sure their books are rotated through the front.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. That's every other place I've been in every other country, except when you get to kind of the very small publishers, are all very professional, modern buildings, and then there's Tor, where they're basically working in a crypt. It was really funny because a lot of the cubicles, like you probably worked in one of these, Adam, where they just constructed cubicles in the middle of a hallway because there was nowhere else to put them.
Yeah.
I had a cubby, an
You had
alcove.
An alcove.
Yes.
Nice.
there were many people who just had desks in halls,
Yeah.
no partitions, just
Wow.
Yeah.
it was floor to ceiling books, tunnels of books, and
And in my head, that was recent, but it wasn't. It was probably like 5 years ago or something.
yeah, it was 2016. It's
Yeah.
been a minute.
All right, our stream looks stable.
It looks stable.
For those who are who missed right when we changed, we called our IT guy, and he told us some things to do that hopefully will keep the stream stable for the rest of the afternoon / evening. So.
Slash morning,
Slash
depending
morning?
on where you are.
Yeah.
Yes, depending on where you are. So hopefully you won't have to migrate again. You can continue to listen to our wonderful voices and see our unmakeup faces. That's one of the things I keep meaning to do is get us to have like a makeup department. Here, so that someone will come like throw powder at our faces or whatnot before
Right.
we go live.
That would make me feel real special.
Have you ever had that done?
I have not. No.
Oh yeah. Like that happened. Like the first part of my career, it never did, and then suddenly I started doing interviews that were there's like a dividing line where
Yeah.
you show up and then they put you in a chair. They do your hair and makeup. They do that thing. This is a fun thing for people who don't know where they put a clothespin on the back of your clothing. Like if you go to the mall and see mannequins. If you peek around back, often the clothing is like safety pinned or clothespinned so that it fits better.
Right.
They do that to you, so you can barely move. So you're all clothespinned up the back. You have your hair pristine and they've put makeup all over so that your nose doesn't shine. And then you do your 3-minute interview.
Yeah.
And then they're done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first time that happened, I'm like, what? Really? What are you doing? What's going on? But yeah. They did that for all of the, most recently for me, all the stuff I did for the Wheel of Time, like B-roll, behind the scenes stuff that they're making.
Right.
Yeah. They actually sent a whole crew here to the office and set everything up for those interviews, which was fun. The whole team then got to see what sometimes happens to poor Brandon.
Yeah.
We're these little authors who want to hide in our caves and tell stories about wizards. We don't know what to do when people are like, all right, we're going to make you look presentable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I've gotten like a fairly decent grip as like a shy person of the generalized public stuff as an author, but occasionally there's something slightly higher profile, and then I'll just be drenched in sweat the whole time. Like, what am I doing? Am I doing this right? Am I saying? Am I babbling? What's happening?
That's interesting. I would not have pegged you as a shy person. You've got a very good extrovert mode that you can turn on to do performance for a while.
I am massively shy, and it's weird because I've been thinking about this a lot lately as stuck in my cave with COVID. Like you don't. I feel like my generation grew up right between people able to people starting to acknowledge things like, oh, this child has anxiety or depression and things like that, and so I grew up right before that became a thing that you watched for kids,
Right.
and like as an adult that kind of just got through it, I kind of look back and go, oh, wow, that's why I was nervous all the time. I probably have a bit of an anxiety disorder and a bit of low-key depression and things like that. And it's one of those things that I'm really glad as an adult to see it's being talked about a lot more and publicly because I feel like I did kind of get past it. But I know what it feels like, And I don't know, did I go too serious?
No, that's good. That's really good. I mean, I agree 100%. The number of these things people talk about, people these days are just too coddled, or there's too many things diagnosed. I'm like, no, you've got it inversed. In the past, people just had to try to soldier through. Just like for most of our existence, people did not have glasses.
Yeah.
Their lives would have been way better with glasses. The fact that you can look back and say, all those medieval peasants without glasses, they did just fine. We don't need glasses anymore. No.
Yeah.
Their lives would have been way better.
Yeah.
And in the same way, our modern understanding of mental health and the idea that most people can use some help now and then, and a lot of people can use some consistent help to understand their own psychology is a very good thing. in my opinion.
Well, and you can even look at somebody and say, look, you think that the younger generations are too coddled. Would you rather they be like your granddad who drank himself to death after
Yeah.
World War II?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I mean, he probably still got his work done, but he wasn't happy.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. What's surprising to me is the number of actors I meet who are shy. Because you never expect actors to be shy, but apparently a lot of them are.
Yeah. I'm actually super fascinated by that whole thing because, especially with actors, I think there's an element there of becoming a different person for the screen.
Yep.
And then I think that there's something similar with writers in that, like, I'm way more comfortable typing and writing something than I am speaking it. And it's weird how different people can seem very gregarious and outgoing on the page or on the screen, but then when you get them alone, they're apparently a lot of comedians are the same way.
Yeah.
And it's just it's something because especially on the screen you don't see it. Everything's scripted.
Yeah.
And so it's not talked about.
You expect the author to be an introvert because of the job they've chosen. You expect the actor to be extrovert, but it doesn't correlate that way. There are a lot of extroverted authors. Shannon Hale, right? Like Shannon is wonderful, and she does not seem the least bit shy to me in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she's just got a nice extroverted persona she can put on like you.
Well, my dad was, he kind of had a lot of mid-level local church positions when I was growing up. And so he was constantly always, lots of walking around, shaking hands, saying hi to everybody, being very outgoing. And it was not until the last couple of years that I realized, oh, I'm exactly like my dad, meaning he's actually quite shy and introverted, but he figured out how to turn it on early on.
What did your family think of you becoming an author?
I'm the youngest of 6.
Oh, they just didn't care.
So the expectations were pretty low.
Yeah.
I think that they think it's pretty cool. Like they were very supportive. Even my dad, who's always been a very kind of business oriented person, from kind of the beginning of me saying, oh, I kind of would like to be an author. He was pretty supportive in that kind of fatherly, well, make sure you get a degree just in case you have to have another job. But I fully support you writing. And so he was really cool about it. My parents they both have a bit of a creative edge to them. When my dad was younger, he did a lot of photography and things like that before he entered kind of a business world and went and worked in New York. He wanted to be kind of out in nature and take pictures of cool things. And my mom has always enjoyed writing. She's dabbled a bit in it here and there, and so they both kind of got it. And being the youngest of 6, I was able to just kind of say, I want to do this, and they were kind of like, oh yeah, that sounds fine.
I kind of envy you guys a little bit. In Korean, they have a term for you. It's called the maknae. And the maknae is the youngest child, but it means more than youngest child.
Yeah.
It means all of this stuff that comes along with being youngest child, such as the parents having lost a little bit of their neuroses about their children picking the perfect job and turning out perfectly as a reflection on them.
Yeah.
And, like when I say they didn't care because you're the 6th child, by then they've learned, number one, they probably can't steer the children that well. And if they do try to career-wise, it ends up being tense and wrong. And they've also learned, kids will figure it out. They'll do it. It'll be all right. I'm an oldest child, and they don't tend to respond the same way when the oldest child, upon whom all hopes and dreams are pinned, wants to be go off and dance in the flowers and be an artist. They're like, yeah, you were on track to be a doctor. Let's talk about that some more.
Yeah.
I love my mom. But she took until I showed her a check that someone had written me, and I said, look at this check. This is actual money. And she was like, oh yeah, that's an actual job. And from then on, she's like, okay, he has a real job.
I've gotten a little bit. I've gotten more of that from my siblings than my parents.
Oh, yeah?
I have one brother who called me about 3 years into my career, and he called me and kind of in that brotherly way was like, hey, so the writing thing, when are you going to get a real job? And so I told him how much money I'd made that year, and he stopped asking.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've mentioned this before, but all my friends who are writers have stayed writers. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my friends who are not writers have lost jobs, changed jobs, found new careers, gone back to college, all of this stuff. My writer friends are all still writers.
Yeah.
Which is, challenging the idea that that the writer is the really unstable job. Now, granted, those writers live with some instability that you don't, because you're never quite sure if you're going to have enough money to make it through the next year or where you're going to find the projects to do. But everybody finds projects and does stuff. So, I don't know. I'm almost finished with these. If you're wondering what I'm signing, these are the Black Friday signed editions for Barnes & Noble of Cytonic. And so, if you are wanting to get a signed copy of Cytonic, your local Barnes & Noble should have some of these all around the United States. And of course, we will do some other signed edition stuff.
Yeah, we have a pre-order book bundle coming up soon.
Okay, our pre-order book bundle is coming out soon. Yay!
We're so close.
All right, there we are. Those are done. Take them away, team. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Looks like I'm moving back to Leatherbound. So, everybody who's waiting for a signed Leatherbound, I am on to Mistborn, the first one. So,
The unsigned are ordered.
unsigned are ordered. The people told us we should get some unsigned ones in stock, just for those who really want a Leatherbound. Then don't care if it's signed or not, or plan to find me later on to get it signed. So those will eventually come to our store.
Does your signature stay very consistent?
Yeah.
Because mine does not.
Doesn't it?
No.
That's funny.
I have a very wobbly hand, and so I simplified my writer signature as much as I could. It's literally a large B with a squiggle.
Yes.
And which Brian Stavely has the exact same signature as me.
Oh, yeah?
Weirdly, which maybe he did the exact same thing I did. But every single time the B is a different size. It's got a little bit of a weirder wiggle at some places. It's never the same.
I bet you could take these things and overlap them and find a very, you would find many of them are exactly the same as one another. But I don't know, how many giant signing sessions have you done?
Not many.
Yeah.
No.
Have they ever had you into the warehouse to sign? Yeah.
No.
I think once they sit you down and say, all right, we're doing 5,000 of these in the next couple hours.
Yeah.
You end up being forced to, even with the wobbly hand and things, to find the way to do this that becomes more standardized.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the wobbly Brian signature is a thing that's always going to be a thing.
See, I always felt a little embarrassed by my signature, so I got a stamp. That's one of the symbols designed by Isaac.
Yep.
And so I do my wobbly signature, and then I do like a very official looking stamp over it. I feel way better about it now.
We did that for one tour I did. And it just added another layer of something that has to be done.
Right.
That slowed me down too much, I felt, but it was very cool.
Yeah, but doing 500 signatures versus
Yeah.
doing like 20,
Yeah.
I can still handle a stamp.
This is going to sound like first world author problems. I've complained to Dan about this before, but I missed the 20-person signings.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the 20-person signings were so relaxed. And so, like, you go and, like, you can meet the eyes of every person in the crowd. Mm-hmm. You can see how they are enjoying the reading. You can answer a question from everyone. You can feel like it's, like, a personal connection. Whereas, when there's 5,000, which there have been at some of my signings, it's a very different experience, right?
Yeah.
Even when there's 500, which is a common signing. That said, I have still done some of the 20-person ones. Like, this is entertainment, things are erratic. I don't know if you've ever shown up at a signing and there's like nobody.
Oh yeah.
But like I've shown up, and it as recent as like 3 or 4 years ago, we did a signing at the holidays in Salt Lake, and Isaac and I were both there, and we showed up, and there was like 30 people.
Yeah.
And we signed their books in a half hour, and we're like, oh, well, what do we do now? And so yeah, it just happens, the whims of whatever, like something else is happening, or the news doesn't quite get out there, or it happened to me in New York, because it's New York, and where you know, sometimes some of my biggest signings ever have been in New York, and my smallest tour signing in years happened in New York, where I just showed up, it was raining, I think it was in Brooklyn, which is, you know, so everybody's like, I'm not going to Brooklyn, or oh, there's a game on, or it's raining, and you show up there and there's like, you know, a handful of people.
Right. I'm always slightly fascinated by what makes signings tick, because I get pretty good crowds in overseas when I'm in Europe. In the U.S., I don't know if I've had more than 15 or 20 people. Probably only a handful of times.
Where are your biggest?
Hungary and Poland.
Hungary and Poland. Oh,
Yeah.
Poland is awesome.
Yeah.
I really like. I've never been to Hungary, but I have enjoyed going to Poland. They seem to really like authors in Poland.
Honestly, it's the best crowds I get, and the most involved and interested, and I love signing in Poland.
But you know, I think part of it might be this idea that the author has come so far. So I'm going to go see them because I won't have another chance. And if you're in New York, they're like, authors come to New York all the time.
Yeah.
I'll see them next time.
I'm getting a lot of F's in chat, so I'm not sure if the stream went down.
Uh-oh.
Now I'm getting other comments. So let us know if the
What was the F's in chat for?
F is...
Yeah, I know what F is. I know what F is. I'm saying, I'm asking the people in chat,
Okay.
why are you typing F? No, F is one of my very favorite memes of all
Yes,
time.
it's great.
So-
I think we're still up. Stream's
Yes.
okay. All right.
Uh-huh.
People just trying to scare me, troll me, make my heart rate elevate.
Yeah, we could all totally ghost Adam in some interesting way, where we've all set it up ahead of time to do something weird.
Yeah. It's funny because with signings is like it's one of those weird things, because like there's an element of ego in a signing.
Yeah.
It's showing up to a signing, because I have showed up to signings that are like group signings, and I'll have like 2 people come up to me, and I'll look over at an author that I know I sell a lot more books than, and they'll have 30 people, 40 people, and honestly, it's one of those things that sounds egotistical and really stupid. And even talking about it out loud, I feel a little dumb, but it's totally an ego thing where you go, why do I not have that many people or more?
Yeah. It's there is a thing there, right? You can't help but compare. I remember when it was the last time. It was when you were with you and Isaac were with us, right, Kara, in Spain, when Pat was there. And I had been cultivating an audience in Spain. It's one of the strongest bastions of Cosmere fandom outside of the States. And so there's this convention I really like there. It's called Celsius. I've been a bunch of times. Joe Abercrombie often goes. It's just a really great convention. And Pat was going, and Pat and I were walking to our signings, and I saw my line. It was enormous.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this might be the one time in my life where I have a signing that's like bigger than Pat's. And so I'm talking to Pat. I'm like, yeah, I've done a lot of work here, in Spain. He's like, oh, really? Yeah. And then he held up his book. He's like, I'm in my 28th printing. And then we rounded the corner, and his line was like wrapped around the building 3 times. And I'm like, Pat.
Oh,
Can't take you anywhere.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yes.
I ran his line for him.
Did ya? Yeah, that's right, because they didn't know what to do with lines that
He
big.
didn't know what to do, so I
and
ran the line for him.
Kara is an expert at running very large lines at conventions, and so, yep. Good old Pat.
And we have a lot of people wanting Brian to introduce himself again.
Oh, okay.
Some new people coming in chat. Just
So this is the person who lives on the street back out behind my house. Now, Brian?
So I'm Brian McClellan. I write epic fantasy novels. I don't know if, so you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I was one of Brandon's first students to break in to kind of big publishing.
Yeah. I don't know, like it's either you or Jancy, right?
I'm not 100% sure.
But Brian is one of those that I don't even really introduce as one of my students because he was in my first or second class when I had no idea what I was doing, and we're basically the same age. And it was more like class back then was a big writing group that Brandon was kind of running. And so Brian's one of my oldest writer buddy friends, and writes the Powder Mage series and a new series coming out from Tor next year with my same editor.
Yes.
Who I stole from him, and then he got back.
Yes. It's very complicated.
Yes.
Very incestuous.
Yes, because Davey was at Orbit, and then Davey came to Tor, and my editor, Moshe, was moving toward retirement. And so I kind of saw the writing on the wall that Davey was Davey, and she would be running the place before too much longer. So she and I sat down. I'm like, all right, you want to have Tor's biggest author. I want to have Tor's best editor. We should make an arrangement. And we did. And so she became my editor. And then she went and grabbed and plucked Brian away from his previous publisher because she had been his editor there and brought him over into the fold at Tor.
Well, it's funny because, like, growing up, I remember thinking, like, looking at the spines of books, and Tor was the only, like, little symbol that I ever recognized. And so I always knew about Tor, even when I was little writer that didn't pay, or little reader that didn't pay attention to anything.
See, I knew Tor, but I also knew Del Rey, because Del Rey did Anne McCaffrey and a bunch of the authors that I really liked, and Daw. There's a bunch of really long-standing, great publishers in the industry. Though these days they're all owned by one of the five conglomerates. Is it four now?
Is it four?
Four, yeah,
Jeez.
because
Four.
Simon got bought. So did Simon got bought by Random again, right? Or is it,
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
For how few there are, you'd think that we would. But
Yeah.
I
I
have
always
so
have to
many
look it up.
imprints.
When I was trying to break in, I knew everything.
Yes.
Like I had an encyclopedic knowledge of everything. And then as soon as I got like into the industry, I just stopped paying
That's
attention.
your agent's job now.
Right, exactly.
Yep. Now I have to pay attention to it every year for my class. So I have to go get a primer from Joshua, my agent, before I do my lecture on here's what's up in the industry right now and how things look. And so I don't have to know it again until April next year.
Yeah.
That's when I'll go back to my notes and figure it all out. But yeah. So for those who don't know, what happened in the industry is it used to be all these little publishers. And then they started getting gobbled up, but they left the little publishers' names and called them imprints, and generally left their kind of command structure mostly intact. And so you would have Holzbrink, which is a big German publisher that owns Macmillan, which has gobbled up Tor and St. Martin's, but Tor will still be run by the person who founded Tor. At least it was up until Tom's retirement a few years back. And will kind of be an independent entity, and that we call those imprints.
Yeah.
And so it's this weird industry of nested ownership and things like that. So
Yeah, trying to explain that to somebody who isn't a reader
yeah,
is always a little weird when they ask what I do for a living. And it's like, well, I work for this company, but I don't really work for them. I work for myself, but they buy the stuff that I make, and
we are independent contractors. That's how it's handled, and both of us are slightly entrepreneurial. He says as he signs the leather-bound books that his company releases. One of the things I like about the self-publishing and indie author revolution is it just gives us another avenue.
Yeah.
Which, while New York publishers are kind of consolidating, there is this other venue. This people consider self-publishing a legit thing now. And I had a Kickstarter that did pretty well last year that was self-published. So So yeah, it's a nice little world for us to be in.
Yeah, I mean, for the moment, you never know when everything will change again.
Yes, it is totally possible. But that's actually why I did the Kickstarter in the first place, is because I wanted an avenue directly to my readers.
Yeah.
That, like, I feel like now I could do that on any website that popped up, and I could drive people to buy the book where they needed to go to buy the book, if that makes sense, which is great sort of little insurance policy for the company here.
Yeah.
Once you have several dozen employees, you want to make sure that one person at a publishing industry can't decide to turn off your career.
Yeah.
With the snap of their fingers. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was, it did it was a small factor in me coming over to Tor, was thinking, well, having Epic Fantasy Series at Orbit still, that my backlist does quite well still, and then having my new series be from a different publisher, it's not a bad idea.
No, diversifying is, I mean, that's why I'm at Random House with my YA books, is because just, having two people then, like one can't snap their fingers, and but of course we're all under Jeff Bezos's thumb, right?
Right.
Like, if he snaps his fingers, he decides he doesn't like Brian McClellan, that's it.
Right.
But that's why the whole Kickstarter thing that we did was an attempt to make sure that even the wealthiest man in the world could not destroy my career on a whim if he so decided.
Right.
He's too busy flying to space these days to care about that. But I did care about it. So thank you for everyone who supported my Kickstarter, because that is peace of mind that we could run the company off of that if we needed to.
Well, and I do think that you get a little bit of the kind of movement to try to buy books directly from the author a little bit more these days.
Yeah.
Even with like I just even have like a little tiny website store where I sell signed copies of my books, and I know a lot of authors are doing that now, and it's one of those kind of mixed things, because part of you wants to not take the money from like a bookstore.
Yep.
But the other part of you is like, well, if I can act as my own bookstore, that kind of makes a lot of sense for me.
Well, and a lot of those, I'm done with this stack, Kara. A lot of those, I don't know if you still do this, but are remaindered copies, right? Do you still buy your?
I buy them when they're up,
Yeah.
and when they're not, I just buy them
by the regular
wholesale.
And so for those who don't know, the remainders are the ones when the publisher's done. They've all sold through the bookstores, and they're just going to sell them to one of these bulk discounters that you find at like the front of Barnes and Noble, or at these bargain book places that they put at the outlet malls and things like that.
Yeah.
And the author, if they're wily and fast, can buy all of those. We had many copies of Mistborn in our garage for a while back when I was brand new. And I extolled the virtues of this to all my writer friends, and I feel like they're finally listening and selling their books on their stores, because for a while I couldn't get anybody to listen to me. I'm like, no, guys, you really need to do this. This is important for more than just the money. It is important for the idea of the personal connection to the fans. And these days, the funny thing is, we don't sell them on my website.
Yeah.
Because signing them just takes too much time. You can see that every moment that I can be signing something is a moment that I should be signing something.
Yeah.
And I just can't get through all the leather bounds even that we want to provide for people. So we don't have the regular signed hardcovers on the store anymore, I don't believe. Am I right, Kara?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. It's possible they'll come back.
Around Christmas, maybe.
Yeah, maybe for Christmas, more as a service to the fans and things like that. But yeah,
Won't be regularly there.
it's hard to get things signed. What other? We haven't even asked for questions in forever, but the stream has been very stable. So good
The
job.
stream has been stable.
Yes.
Thank you, Jared, if you're watching, for telling us where to plug into to get internet. So Matthew Crabtree says, how do you change the reader's perceptions of a character? For example, from the Stormlight Archive, they hated Shallan in the first book, but by book 3, Shallan was their favorite.
So in this case, there's a lot of things going on. Shalon, there's some specific things going on that are kind of individual to Shalon. But one of the things you'll notice as a writer is that readers will pick favorites. And one of the things they'll dislike is characters that pull them away from their favorites. And so you don't always even have to do this intentionally. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you have a character that you build that your intent is for the reader to come to understand them, and so you start by making them somewhat off-putting on purpose, and then you slowly reveal this character. And I think it boils down to the classic ways that you characterize to make someone sympathetic. You show their perspective. You make sure their motivations make sense. You build sympathy for them by showing them struggling and how things are hard for them. You basically just kind of get the reader into their worldview over time, and as long as that worldview makes sense, then it helps. Another thing that really helped with Shalon, and I knew some people would have a rough time with Shalon in the first book, is once you bring those characters together with other characters and you have the opportunity to show them their interactions, and if the characters interacting make one another more interesting, then that's a good way, right? To make a character that might have fell off on their own and distracting you from the real story. Once you bring that character into the quote-unquote real story and show them interacting, then it changes your perspective on them. In the Stormlight Archive, it's the flashback sequences that are a big part of that. It's the building, the motivation, and showing who the character was and how they have been growing since before the series began. Helps a lot.
I like having a conversation with a character who knows the other character really well, and so you're getting a perspective from a third party who can tell you straight up, oh, the reason why they do this is because of this. You know, they were confused, or they did something that was poor judgment that they super regret now. You know, there's lots of ways that you can just show humanity, and doing it through the eyes of a third party is always good. Jumping inside of their own head, point of view, that's a great way to just show the reader that this person is a fully realized character. That even if they didn't like them or find them boring, they have things that are interesting about them, or they have reasons for an act they did that you hate.
Exactly. I mean, that's the Jaime Lannister thing, right? A lot of people, one of the brilliant parts about Game of Thrones is that a lot of people came to find Jaime Lannister one of their favorite characters 2 books after he threw a kid out a window. Yeah. Which is showing George's mastery of character and viewpoint. And it is one of the more fun things. Like, Sterys has been one of my favorite characters in the Wax and Wayne books. For those who haven't read those, Sterys is very off-putting on purpose in the first book when we don't know her very well. And then we kind of get to understand. And a lot of times in real life, this is actually based off of in real life coming to know some people that were very off-putting at first to me. And you find out that their off-puttingness is not them trying to be difficult or trying to be mean. It is that the person has interesting quirks of personality that when you get to know them become lovable. But this happens with a lot of characters in books. The idea that we're telling from the viewpoint of the character, and so all of their weird character quirks are lovable to us. But if you were a person in that world just meeting this person for the first time, you'd be like, that person is an enormous jerk and a big pain in my neck. Yeah. Right? And kind of reversing that on the reader once in a while is a lot of fun. Like, I would not want to be the person running the tavern when the band of adventurers who are all main characters come to the tavern, because it is going to be a terrible night.
Right. They're going to trash the place. They're not going to pay their bill. Yeah. They're awful.
Someone's going to try to assassinate them. And even if none of that happens, they are going to be so weird, personality-wise, that they're going to be very difficult to deal with, and they're going to make life a huge pain. So, has someone ever written that book? The innkeeper who runs the tavern that all of the adventuring parties start at?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Tell me in chat if anyone has written that book. Otherwise, I think I have a new thing to discuss with Dan on our next podcast of weird ideas for books Brandon's never going to write.
I really like writing characters who could easily be the villain of someone else's story. Because it's fun because they're going to be a little bit darker than kind of the normal, high fantasy character that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The farm boy, which is actually a trope I absolutely loathe.
Oh, yeah? What do you got against Luke Skywalker?
You know what? No, growing up as a teenager, I loved the farm boy stuff. I loved Wheel of Time. I loved Luke Skywalker, all that stuff. But as a writer, I just don't like it. I don't like the trope. I don't like.
I'm naming my next farm boy Brian.
I mean, Brian is actually a great farm boy name, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. It's a really good one. It's like, oh, Brian. Of course he's Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantasy world, There's, Thognor and Ixalik and Blarksplack and Brian. And you're like, oh, well, there's the farm boy.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Totally makes sense.
The prophesied farm boy with that
Yes,
name.
the prophesied
compared to
farm
the
boy.
others.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But his last name would be something a little bit cooler than McClellan.
Yeah.
McClellan is not a bad name in our continuity.
Yeah.
It's got, but in the fantasy world, it's got to be, Brian, and they're like, oh, Brian what? And he's like, Brian Sword Skull.
Right.
And you're like, oh, that's an interesting name. He's like, yeah, it just means farmer in the old tongue. And they're like, oh, really? That's an interesting coincidence.
Brian McKnife.
Yeah, Brian McKnife.
McKnifey.
Yeah.
McKnifey, yeah.
Yeah. What's our dragon named upstairs by the internet?
Beauregard McRar
Beauregard
was the vote
McRar,
that fans had.
Yeah, Beauregard McRar is our dragon statue.
It's as good as Bodie McBoatface.
Yeah, ours is a little better than
Little
Bodie
bit better.
McBoatface. I mean, I've got to be honest. I feel pretty good about that one. We went to the internet, and I think you did prevent them from going the direction that 4chan usually likes to go.
There was no Dragon McDragonface in the poll option.
Well,
People
if
could
you
vote
end up
for.
with Dragon McDragonface on a poll where they get to submit their own choices, you are lucky.
Yeah.
Yes, you are very, very lucky. Let's just say it can go far worse than Dragon McDragonface. But Beauregard McRoar. We've got only 10 minutes left, right?
Probably even more like 5 because you have to get up and
they have to get up
onto the meeting.
to the meeting.
Oh,
So
man.
5 minutes left. Time flies when you're hanging out with Brian McKnifey.
So this next question is podcast related, and Brian, you might as well tell people about your podcast as well.
Yeah, sure. I'll pitch myself. I don't
This
mind.
question is, 2 weeks ago in your podcast, Brandon, you talked about the greatest heist movies. How can you live with yourself knowing you didn't even give National Treasure an honorable mention?
See, we talked about National Treasure in a different podcast.
I'm trying to remember if that was.
That was the lower rated ones. And so since we had talked about it so much already, it should have an honorable mention. But we'd already talked about that it is much better than its Rotten Tomatoes score indicates. We actually watched it for the 4th of July in my house because my kids had never seen it. But yes, you're right. It should have at least been given an honorable mention in that podcast. You are correct.
And then, Brian, if you want to tell us about your podcast.
So I just started a podcast. I've been thinking about it for years. I listen to several British podcasts that are British comedians, and they just chat.
Is this no such thing as a fish and that sort of stuff?
That's the QI guys, right?
Yeah.
I actually don't listen to that one. I really need to put it on my list.
It's good.
The Adam Buxton podcast,
Uh-huh.
and then the Comedian's Comedian with Stuart Goldsmith, I think. I love this format of two creative professionals sitting down and just chatting for an hour. And so their chat can be anything, talking about their kids or, what their hobbies are, or they talk about craft, which most of them will come around to at some point. And I was like, man, that seems like it would be really fun to do with fantasy authors.
Yep.
So I'm 7 episodes in, and I've been getting on podcasters I got Veronica Belmont and Tom Merritt. And my 10th episode is going to be Robin Hobb.
Sweet. Robin Hobb is so great.
She's so lovely, and I feel like I babbled for half the podcast. Which I guess I'll give myself a pass on that one.
Robin Hobb, the unofficial mom of all fantasy authors.
Yeah. I think I at one point told her I want her to be my grandma.
Yeah.
So that's not embarrassing at all.
Like, I've been on tour, and Robin Hobb has asked, "Did you pack a lunch?" Like, she is great.
But it's just been it's been fun. I started off by talking to my showrunner Joe Malozzi and talking about producing for TV and things like that. And I'm just I'm trying to go all over the place. I'd love to get a comedian on at some point to talk about writing for comedy, writing for stand-up specifically would be super cool.
That would be interesting.
But yeah, I have no idea how long I'll do it. But I've got I think I've got 13 or 14 already lined up, and then a bunch of more people I'll send invites to. At some point, I'll pester you for time when you have time.
Yeah.
So
I have to sit and sign thousands of copies of things every week. So we do have time occasionally that I'm sitting here doing this, and this is when I podcast actually most weeks is while I'm sitting and signing my name over and over again. Though I think this stack is almost done. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Thank you for dealing with all this. Oh, Adam has a...
name of the podcast. I don't think
yeah.
you mentioned
Oh, yeah. It's a Page Break with Brian McClellan.
Oh, that's a good name.
Yeah.
Nice name. Well done. Yeah, I'm terrible at naming podcasts. We still don't have a name for mine.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, thank you guys. Sorry about the technical issues. We did get it worked out eventually. You can watch the VOD on my channel if you missed part of it by being in the wrong stream room.
I'm going to go upstairs and combine them into one video. So.
All right, so we will see you all next month. Early September is when our next stream will be, and we will see you there.